Good afternoon,
is being recorded.
and welcome to the Greater Illinois Chapter of HIMSS virtual event, Measuring Success and Customer Satisfaction in an Agile Environment. My name is Melissa Braff from Northwest Community Healthcare, a part of North Shore, and a member of the Educational Programs Committee at GIC HIMSS. I'd like to inform you of a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. If at any time you have a question, please hover your mouse at the bottom of the screen towards the middle and go to the question box and enter your question into the box. We will answer as many questions as we can, but if not within our allotted time, your questions will be answered via email. Upon exiting the webinar, you will be presented with our evaluation survey. We appreciate all feedback, but if in particular you are looking for or requesting continuing education credit for CA HIMSS or CP HIMSS, you are required to complete an evaluation. After the evaluation is submitted, a certificate will be emailed to you by the end of the week. Again, welcome to our virtual event, Measuring Success and Customer Satisfaction in an Agile Environment. We'd like to thank our sponsors for their support, as without them, none of this would be possible. Our founder sponsors, Fortinet, Secure IT 360, Hanukkah Minolta, SailPoint, Brother, Connection, and our elite sponsors, Zebra, Dr. First, Assimile, and Pure Storage. We have some upcoming events that we want to hopefully see you at. On October 27th, we're actually doing a double of our normal in-person events. So if you're able to take the afternoon off, at 3:30, we will have one presentation, and then we will have a second presentation at 6 o'clock. So we can cater towards after work or even in the afternoon. Come join us for exploring the intersection between healthcare and AI at Michael Jordan's Steakhouse in Oak Brook. On November 8th, we have a webinar at noon, Applying Intelligence and Reducing Friction Across IT and Clinical Staff, in which we'll be hearing from our folks at Rush University and sponsored by SailPoint. On November 15th, we have a webinar at noon again, Impact of the 21st Century Cures Act on Healthcare. This will be a panel discussion and brought to you in collaboration with New York State Chapter of HIMSS. And then on December 13th, we have another webinar at noon, Nurse Informaticists Bringing Value Through the Product Life Cycle of mHealth Apps, presented by yours truly, along with Dr. Tammy Wyatt. So we hope to see you at all those events, but for more information, visit our website. Connect with GIC HIMSS on social media. Join the conversation and stay informed. We are on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and a new addition, I think, Instagram as well. Now, for today's presentation, I would like to introduce our moderator, Tom Cagley. He is a consultant, speaker, author, and coach who leads organizations and teams to unlock their inherent greatness. He has developed estimation models and has supported organizations developing classic and agile estimates. Tom helps teams and organizations improve cycle time, productivity, quality, morale, and customer satisfaction, and then proves it. Tom is an internationally respected blogger and podcaster for over 11 years, focusing on software, process, and measurement. His blog entries and podcasts have been listened to or read well over 1 million times. He co-authored Mastering Software Project Management, Best Practices, Tools, and Techniques with Murali Shimartori.
Close enough.
Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. And here's the sad part. Remember, if many of us might remember the old McDonald's sign that said millions and, it counted up and now it says millions and millions. Well, once upon a time, it was 11 years in podcasting. Now it's 16. So, time flies when you're having fun. By the way, that AI thing that you're doing is really important because that is the future. Tomorrow in the House of Commons in the UK, an AI is actually giving testimony, sworn testimony in terms of whether or not an AI can be creative. So we are living in an interesting world. I am really excited about doing this again. This is the second time you've asked me to be a moderator. We've got a great panel today. We're going to go through and let everyone introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive into the topic. But why don't we do this in sort of alphabetical order by first name? Grace, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Grace Schroba. I am a IT portfolio manager under Northwestern Medicine. And part of my function is to provide oversight for projects, programs, products, and service lines across the NMIS, or Northwestern Information System organization. I'm also leading the Agile transformation under NMIS, Northwestern Medicine Information System, where we are implementing a number of different Agile frameworks, those being Scrum, Scrumban, and Kanban. And in today's discussion, we were hoping that we will mainly focus on Scrumban and Kanban, just because as we are onboarding teams into specific frameworks, we're having a hard time finding videos, discussions, podcasts that address the Scrumban and Kanban disciplines. And people get confused as to, we are going into an Agile transformation and therefore it's Scrum, or Scrum is Agile. So we're trying to provide that discussion today to expand that understanding of what the Agile practices are. So happy to be here.
And you just given me a brand new topic to handle on the podcast. So Case, I think you're next.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Case Kostaki. I'm a program manager at Northwestern Medicine. I work alongside Grace and Maggie in the Agile transformation team. I'm also a Scrum Master for 3 Agile teams in the HR and finance and supply chain realm. Like Grace mentioned, we will be focusing on Scrumban and Kanban today. So we'll go a little bit into what Scrumban is and how we use Scrumban with our teams. I'm also an educational director for GIC HIMSS, which is sponsoring this webinar. So thank you so much for having me here.
Super. Maggie.
Hey everybody, I'm Maggie Kinsella. I also work for Northwestern Medicine on the Information Services Talent Management team. I work with Grace and Case doing the Agile transformation work for IS. And my focus is really on the Kanban teams and facilitating our community of practice for Kanban and Scrumban.
Super. Nat, last but absolutely not least, one of my favorite people, Susan Parente.
Thank you. My name is Susan Parente. My company is S3 Technologies. I provide consulting support and project management, Agile, and risk management. So Agile is one of my specialized areas. I have, I believe, 10 Agile certs from 4 certifying bodies. So one of the things I do in addition to providing consulting services is I do training and teaching. I teach at 4 different universities, some of which I do teach Agile at. And how I got here is I know Tom from my my podcast called Not a Scrum Dementalist. So he thought I was a good person to add on. I'm excited about this conversation, and it's always fun to talk about Agile. So thanks for having me here.
Super. Before we dive in, I'm going to go off script just a little bit. Grace, can you give us a thumbnail as to what Kanban is, so that Scrumban is, because, people may not have heard that. It's, and I know that some people are not thrilled with this metaphor, but in my mind, it's a Reese's cup, right? It's peanut butter and chocolate, but why don't you give us a thumbnail?
Yeah, so that exactly it. the Reese's, which I don't like, but that's what we use from our pictures in our workshops. But Scrum Bunny really takes the best of Scrum, right? The organization, the ceremonies, the events, the planning, and sprints and that kind of a thing, from a plannable standpoint, but then takes also the Kanban approach, which is to really concentrate on flow, improving the flow and removing those barriers for success. So when you have teams that do not only work on things that are plannable, right, enhancements, then the best approach sometimes is to combine those 2 frameworks to apply to the specific situation. So that's kind of what we've done in Northwestern Medicine, is that once we approach an onboarding of a specific team, we look at what it is that they have, what kind of work that they actually do, how the teams interact, who they work with and depend on, to define what is the best approach for it. And sometimes it's Scrumban, sometimes it's Kanban, and sometimes it's Scrum.
Super. Here's what is important during this session. We have a set of questions that we can go through. It's probably better or more important if we react and answer your questions. There is a lot of talent on this panel, people that have a ton of experience. So I think they can fill in the gaps for you. But before we dive into the questions, let's do a quick, real fast, 1-question lightning round. Agile has to have Scrum at its heart, or it's not Agile. Yes or no? Grace?
Was on mute. No, absolutely not.
Case?
No. Like we're saying, we're talking about Scrumban and Kanban, so no.
Maggie?
Nope.
Susan?
Nope, just one method. Agile has lots of methods.
Yeah, so Agile is pretty agnostic. If you're solving to the values and the principles, you're Agile. So let's dive in with some questions. How does Agile reveal areas for improvement? I mean, process improvement is an important kind of whether we're doing waterfall or anything else, but how does Agile actually reveal areas for improvement? Why don't we go in reverse order on this one? Let's to sort of prime the pump. Susan, why don't you start, and then we'll dive around.
Okay, thank you. So question again, how does Agile, say that again?
Reveal areas for improvement.
Wow.
Or maybe it doesn't.
I think it's inherent in Agile. So it's sort of part of the DNA of Agile. So we have these retrospectives that we do at the end of every iteration. And in those retrospectives, our focus is on continuous improvement. What do we do well? We can't forget that. The retrospective is not just what went wrong, but what did we do well? and let's do more of it. What did we not do well, and what could we do differently? And don't forget to acknowledge people. So, I think that, when I hear metrics, I'll be honest with you, I started out in engineering and doing, sort of manufacturing arenas. And when I hear measurement, I'm just like, oh my gosh, here we go. We're gonna like take so many measurements that we're not going to even build the thing, right? So there could be too much of that. But I think in Agile, we find a sweet spot. What do we really care about that we want to measure? Let's not measure everything. Let's measure the things we care most about. And that's what I like about Agile. It's like realistic, pragmatic measurement for empirical work. Empirical means we do something, we see how it goes, we learn something, and we try again.
Cool. Maggie, can you add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Susan. I think that continuous improvement and being able to reflect in a retrospective and identify areas of improvement is one of the most important things. We also, we do have some metrics that are important to us that, cycle time and throughput that are able to, with our ServiceNow reports, show us how the team health is and where there might be opportunities for improvements. So that has been really helpful for teams as they've gotten into it and they have more data that they are able to interpret.
Cool. Case.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that from a Scrum Bomb perspective. So we talked about retrospectives, and sprint retrospectives are at the heart of Scrum, which is half of Scrum Bomb. I don't know if it's the chocolate or peanut butter, but I'll let the attendees determine that. We gather as a team at the end of our sprints, which are 2 weeks, and talk about what went well, what didn't go well. And then as a team, we try to improve upon that. I just want to make sure to mention to the entire audience, do not use those metrics as a way to put undue pressure on the team. So try to use them as a means to increase that team morale and try to discuss together any potential issues that are going on within the team. So as a team, we can continue to improve and be better. And also when it comes to metrics and continuous improvement, that it gives us an optimistic view. And also we can use that optimistic view to not only move forward as team, but also as an organization.
Optimistic view, what does that mean?
It gives us an overall view of how we can move forward, what we can find areas for improvement. And then obviously we'll not take the huge chunks, but break it down into little chunks, step by step. And then we'll go up the scale for Agile improvement.
Cool. Grace.
So I'll take it from a Kanban standpoint, from an operational reviews that we conduct instead of, it really is.
They're not
some
the
of
same,
the same
retrospectives
it's
and
very,
okay.
It's pretty much the same in regards to retrospective, but it's just a different term. I think the beauty of any of the Agile frameworks is that every day is a new day, right? You try something, right? Your daily stand-ups or your daily scrums or whatever that you're using, and said, you know what we tried yesterday didn't work that well. So let's try something else differently. So it's really looking at how the team is performing currently, what are the results of those decisions, and then make adjustments. Nothing is perfect from the get-go, and you just have to continue to evolve and see what else can be improved upon.
Is anything ever perfect?
Not in my estimation. There's always room for improvement. Always. So
Yeah, I think all of us have probably heard teams once upon a time say, "Oh, we like where we're at. We're the best, right? So we don't have to do the retrospective stuff or the ops review." And all of you mentioned retrospectives and ops review. How do you make sure that those are safe places to have that kind of a conversation?
Good facilitation, if it's a scrum coach or, whatever that role title is. But, I was coaching a team, and there's a lot of changes going on with the team. They've been through a few different scrum masters, a bunch of things like that. And, the software developers are awfully quiet. And, I encourage, support it. Hey, what do you think? I want to hear from everybody. And before I left that contract, there were way more people talking. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. Like, I made it a safe space for people, made it a good place for people to share things. I added acknowledgement, which I think actually opens things up when you say, does anybody have anyone to acknowledge for this past iteration and what happened in the past sprint? That got people talking. There's people who might not talk about what they thought went well or what didn't go well, but they'll acknowledge somebody because they're grateful for some help that they got. And then that ended up opening up things like, wow, that worked really well, but this part didn't work so well. So it gets the conversation going, and also makes people feel good about being part of a team. So I think a good facilitator is going to help make that happen. And it's kind of an odd thing to say, but it's the space that you create, right? So one of the reasons, like, Tom's moderating here is that he's creating a great space for us to all share in conversation. If he wasn't here, it wouldn't be the same. And so that's why they asked him to be here, right? So, but don't underestimate the power of the space that you can create as a powerful facilitator and leader and servant leader.
All right, Case, Maggie, Grace, you want to chime in on how to create a safe space for actually sharing and talking and having those conversations about improvements?
Yeah, Grace, do you want to take it, or do you want me to start?
Sure. I was going to say that what we have done is that we requested, as we, again, onboard teams and such, that the retrospectives or the operational reviews are only for the team, and that those managers, HR managers, right, resource managers, or I don't know, will not participate or attend, so that hopefully that expands the discussion. So that's one. The other thing that we have done or encouraged to do is to rotate the facilitation, right? Even if it's a Scrum One team, right? Then maybe not only the Scrum Master needs to facilitate, right? Make sure that everybody has an opportunity to facilitate, because when you actually do it, you see how hard or easy it is, right? So then, like, oh, next time I will probably prepare, or I will not criticize as much, or whatever, right? So I think that helps the teams to see that you have a voice. You have a voice. You don't have to be a leader, by job title, which is sometimes get in the way of things, that you can make a difference by saying something. If you don't say anything, nothing is going to change. And that's what we're trying to emphasize, is that it is your work life that we're trying to improve, and you have part of it. You can do it. So
cool.
Yeah, and also to that, make it fun, make it a space where people can come at the end of a long 2-week sprint and can, have fun with each other, have those conversations. It helps flourish different conversations and ideas. And also, like Grace said, rotate the facilitator. That helps a lot. From experience with my teams, that has helped in, having one of their own from the development team kind of lead that conversation. It feels like they understand them, and they understand that the work the team is going through. So that helps a lot than the Scrum Master doing it all the time. You get that different perspective. And one last thing that I would say, refrain from giving your own opinion when you're facilitating. That is very important, because you don't want to, move the conversation towards to what you're thinking.
Before you dive in, Susan, Maggie, do you want to add something?
Oh, yeah. So I have noticed, well, we encourage teams to not record the meetings, because it's really just a safe space for the team, and it shouldn't be disseminated outside of that. And we've also, when we've done virtual meetings, we've used the whiteboard and encouraged people to jot their notes down with sticky notes so that everyone really, even if they don't feel comfortable sharing out loud, they're able to share their opinion. And just encouraging the good, the bad, the ugly. It doesn't always have to be positive things. You know, if we don't know the bad things that are happening or the struggles your team is having, we can't help. So.
Super. Susan, can you wrap us up on this one?
Well, I wanted to add something about fun. So I got this idea from somebody, the hot air balloon, and you have the basket with the weights on the bottom. So the hot air balloon, like what has risen us up, what's brought things together in a good way, what's holding us down, what are the sandbags. That's kind of a fun way to do it, you know, rather than just sort of like what was good, what was bad. You know, so that things like that. It's also a good visual. I've done that with a virtual team. Anonymous, you know, feedback is good, but it's also builds a team when people can be candid to other people. It builds trust. So
cool. All right, one more of our canned, and then I'd like to have the audience start feeding us some questions. So start to put questions in the Q&A box, chat box, you know, whatever works for you. But again, this is about you. This is less about us. So before we go to the floor for questions, how do you measure success? How do you measure progress in this Agile stuff? So what are some of the measures that you use? Maggie, I think you actually introduced some of the measures that you use. Is that Kanban, Scrum?
So for Kanban, of course, it's about continuous improvement, and there's a number of factors that we look at for how teams are progressing. I mentioned earlier cycle time and throughput. So ideally, you want cycle time to be going down, meaning that things are being done faster, and throughput to be going up, meaning that more work is being finished. And then we also look at how teams that have been through our Kanban workshop are doing with their team events. So we encourage teams to have daily stand-ups, operational reviews, replenishments, and then overall how their workflow management is. So do they have a lot of items on hold? Are there things that are roadblocks that could be managed better or differently? And all of those things we take into account when we're looking at, you know, how a team is doing. So it might not just be their numbers, it's also how the team is doing with their events.
Cool. You're nodding, Case.
Yeah. For Scrumban, we use also cycle time and throughput at NM, and like Maggie said, we like those the cycle time to go down, throughput to go up. But at the same time, because we work in sprints, we also look at sprint metrics. What are the stories that we committed at the beginning of the sprint? Did we actually complete them? So committed to completed stories, velocity goes into the same way as cycle time. It's another way to say it. And also another thing that I would like to mention is customer satisfaction. You know, have we broken down those silos where IT used to work separately and then the business took over? Are we now working together, getting that feedback and delivering potentially shippable products, not always, at the end of the sprint? You know, are we working with the business all the time? Are we increasing that customer satisfaction? So that's another way.
Grace, I see you nodding along.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said. I think one of the items that I personally think is super important is transparency. The fact that as we, again, continue to move along the Agile transformation effort, having our business partners have access to the work to see what is it that the team is working on and to participate in the prioritization of that work. To me, it's important because now they understand that your item, it's being worked on, where is it? And what kind of support that team may need from those operational people, from those business people, that if they don't work together, then we don't continue to improve and get things through the finish line. So transparency is a big thing in regards to, is the business, is the requester aware of where their request is? Super important.
Susan, with your experience in across multiple industries, what's your perspective on this topic?
Well, I mean, everything's great. It's one of the nice things about a panel. Everybody looks at it from a different direction. I wanted to comment on story points. I think people just run to that metric, and we want to be careful as Tom holds the vampire garlic cross up against the story points. So careful with story points. They are metrics that we care about, but what we care about is what we plan to complete and what we actually did. And it really measures our effectiveness in knowing what we are capable of doing versus what we're doing. So we should never compare story points, like especially our team versus another team. Even the first few iterations of a team coming together, you know, I wouldn't really do much comparison there, because they're still trying to figure out, you know, what is a 1, you know, what is a 2, what, you know, what do these things even mean? So that kind of gets designed by the team. And what I like to use when comparing story points, it's like using British and metric units. You know, you can't compare an inch to a centimeter. Oh, you know, we did 1 inch and they did 2 centimeters. These are different measurements, so we can't compare them. So I would just, you know, caution in the use of story points. Yes, it measures our ability to plan, and that is important, but also cut some slack to a new team. And that also includes if you add or remove team members. I had a team that had a lot of that going on. We added people, got rid of people, and so there was a little bit of shift there with how many story points we could complete, because now you got people coming up to speed. So you want to be careful in how you use that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is I do like pointing out customer satisfaction. Whenever I think of the word quality, I think customer satisfaction. And remember, in the end, for whether it's Scrum, Scrumban, or Kanban, what we're interested in is the value we created, the value that is for the user, for the end user, for the customer. And so if we have a way of measuring that value, we assess the value in the backlog. So measuring that value as an output would be a great metric to use.
Before we go to the question, we're starting to get questions from the audience. Grace, I happen to know that you've taken a different perspective on cutting anyone's slack on story points. Where did you go with story points?
So for Scrumban specifically, we do not use story points. We use cycle time and throughput. What we encourage and train our teams to do is to make sure that they break down the work to the appropriate level. And to really have a relative comparison of how difficult or complicated an item can be. And again, trying to reduce it to the lowest possible level. To Susan's point, what is important is what has been completed and what creates the value, right? And sometimes using story points, I was like, well, you know, this was very complicated, therefore it's kind of a carte blanche to like, oh, we didn't complete this because it was too hard. Well, did we break it down to the right level then, right? So that's why we use cycle time, throughput.
All right, super. Flow metrics, I think that's called. All right, so we have questions from the audience, and James has written us the first question, sent us the first question. Looking across projects in your organization, what is the biggest priority to improve? Project performance, method, tool, skill? So who'd like to start in on that? Maggie.
I don't know if this really answers, but for the first thing that came to mind for me is that we're really trying to improve predictability and quality of the work. I'm gonna look again. So the biggest priority to improve project performance. I don't think that's a method or tool, but I guess it would be a skill. That, yeah, we do want to have our customers kind of know what to expect from us, have a better idea of when to expect something from us, and know that there's going to be less defects or issues with it because of the continuous checking in with our shorter cycles.
And
Grace,
to add,
in case, oh, go ahead.
yeah, to add to that, like Susan and Grace said, it all comes to business value, right? It comes down to that business value. So that's the priority, how we can increase business value. And obviously, like they mentioned, it doesn't matter what method you pick and choose to do that. How do we increase quality? How do we increase predictability and collaborate with each other? That's what it all comes down to.
Grace?
Being a project manager, program manager, and portfolio manager in my lifetime, as well as Scrum Master in all sorts of things. I think from a project standpoint, the challenge has always been that you work, prepare, design, plan, this, that, and the other, and you are so happy to deliver in terms of like, well, that's not exactly what we wanted. Or that's not exactly how we thought it was going to work. So I think to make sure that as the project is being worked on, if that's what is at stake, that is trying to break it down into smaller chunks so that at least you have some kind of feedback as to, are we heading in the right direction? Is this what you really wanted? Was it white or off-white, what you were looking for? So I think, again, being in the industry from a project management standpoint, that is the aha moment as to, well, you know, it's better to know earlier that you're going in the wrong direction.
Susan, with, you know, I know Case, Grace, and Maggie all come from same organization, big organization, so multiple perspectives in different places. How do you answer this question, you know, from that different perspective?
I'm trying to, there's like a few different ways you can read the question, but the way I'm seeing it is, you know, there's always this opportunity cost. You know, how much time do I have and the things that I need to do. And so improving project performance is about improving the value that I can provide to the customer. It's about being more lean. And I think it's a skill. I like to be very, very tool agnostic. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I know what our problem is. We don't have Jira. I'm like, no, you implement Jira, then you're going to have another bunch of problems called, I don't like how Jira does this. So, you know, tools don't solve problems. I think we have to, you know, change sort of our mindset, perspective, how we approach things. But you know, I guess I'm into the efficiency. I'm always trying to do way too many things in the amount of hours that we have in a day. And so my prioritization for that is just basically to be more lean, to create more wheat and have less chaff. You know, that's my ultimate goal.
Amen. Control whip. Okay, another question. This one came in on the, you know, the Zoom submission form when you were signing up. So I don't know who actually suggested this, but what adoption metrics do you feel are most effective when selling organizations on transitioning to Agile or agility? And I'll actually throw sort of a rock in this pool and then let everybody answer it. I would suggest that that adoption metrics a lot of time are vanity metrics. If you're not focused on value, that's the thing. The outcomes is what you're looking for, not the adoption metrics. But that's me being crazy talk. Who wants to go first on this one? Okay, Susan.
Don't want to take the stage too many times, but I love this question because one of the classes I teach, I actually have a final assignment where they have to create an agile transformation plan. So they have to actually transform their organization or project that they're working on. And one of the things that I always go to when asked this question is version 1's State of Agile report. It's an annual report that usually comes out in the spring, about April or May. And when somebody says, I really want to get my organization on board with using Agile, like how do I convince them of that? What metrics can I use? Well, guess what? Version 1 does this every year, and they do it for free. I've actually been polled on it by version 1 also. So what they do is they poll experts in the industry, and they ask them a bunch of questions about Agile, and then they pull together that information and they share those metrics with people. So it'll actually show, how organizations have been transformed and added more value. So it gives you sort of industry-wide metrics. It's one of the places where we know that Scrum is the most widely used Agile method. That stat comes from version 1. So I highly recommend it. It's free, comes out every year. And if you're trying to get your organization to buy into using Agile, that's a great, you don't have to get the metrics yourself. Somebody else has done it. This third party has done it. So I think that's a great way to bolster that.
Okay, so Case, Maggie, Grace, what adoption metrics do you feel are the most important to selling an organization?
For me, can we scale it back a little bit and let's start with one team and the company or organization, and let's do Agile, and we'll see, after doing it for a while, do you see a tangible benefit? And if it is successful, other business units in that organization or company will want to follow. What did you do that improved your work-life balance? What did you do that you increased productivity? What can I do, to get the same type of productivity? And like we've been saying throughout this webinar, one size doesn't fit all. So maybe not the same framework will fit for you, but moving into Agile and being Agile, it's what will, kind of help drive that transformation as well.
Maggie, Grace?
I'll just quickly second Case. I agree that within our organization, I think the success teams have had has kind of sold itself for other teams becoming interested in going through the Agile transformation. So, after the learning curve, of course, it's, benefits have been seen that the organization recognizes.
I agree with that, is that initially in our transformation, there was a lot of discussion and presenting what Agile is at the broader level. But I think when we start targeting a specific teams and talking about the frameworks that are applicable to those teams, it became more real to them. Because again, it always like, oh my God, are you trying to make me Scrum? I'm a desktop support, I'm a network, I'm infrastructure. That doesn't apply to me. I don't even have projects. I can't find anything, right? And however, just looking at what does the team do and how did they do it, in what kind of mix of work they have, that is more impactful in regards to making it better for them and what is applicable to that team versus just generalizing things. But at the end of the day, it's about results. Right. And quite frankly, even those teams that may have pushed hard, every single one of them have seen benefits from a metrics perspective. So I think that is important to know that what they have gone through and what they are working on is actually getting tangible benefits that they can rely on.
So Grace, just going through and saying we've trained 100 teams, we must be transformed is not a good, effective way at monitoring their transformation?
No.
Okay, good. We have another question. This one from Robert. Agile is taking hold and a focus methodology in the IM, IT, PMO world. Not so much with our operations partners we support. Tips, tricks, educating, and getting them on board with this methodology. Historically, they want all or nothing. By the way, I actually think a lot of what you just talked about might have been part and parcel of the answer for this one. So Grace, you want to start on Robert's question?
Uh-oh. So the way I read the question is from operational work. I'm assuming that's what it means. So for us, again, it really is understanding the type of work that the team does. And for our operation teams, the ones that have more unplannable work, it really Kanban is the best fit for them. So that's what we do. We review and analyze, identify the metrics, the current performance, how the mix of work they have, what kind of mix of work they have, and usually for operations, it's Kanban, the best approach.
I'd like to chime into that because some of the teams that I'm a Scrum Master of, our stakeholders are on the operations side. So we have finance, HR, supply chain. And that question that came in the beginning comes in frequently. How do we get that buy-in? How do we get our business people on board? And to be honest with you, it's all about what can you deliver to them? That's how you can get them on board. What can I get from this Agile transformation that it's going to benefit me as a stakeholder, as a business partner? So having them involved in the whole process from the beginning, getting that frequent feedback, getting them on a feedback loop, transparency, what Grace mentioned before, having those dashboards and the work that we do available to them so that they can see what we're doing as a team, what we're delivering, is it making a difference for them? That's how you can get the buy-in, making them your partner and not IT separate and we're separate, and then we're just going to wait for what you deliver. Let's work together to get them on this transformation. That's what I think is really important.
Susan, Maggie, and then we will do one last question and then start to wrap.
So one thing I would look at whenever I hear operational activities is look at DevOps. It's an area that I'm learning a little bit more about as I go, but one of the intentions of DevOps is to help take this Agile development and bring it into operations. I do like the answer also, like in using Kanban. This is why Agile has a number of methods. Scrum doesn't work for everything. It probably won't work in operations because it's meant as a development. Scrum is not just used for IT, but it's focused on development and not operations. So using another method of Agile works, and also look into DevOps and what that might offer you.
Maggie, anything you want to add before we go to what's going to almost have to be our last question, unfortunately?
Yeah, I think that my colleagues here have done a great job summarizing, so I'll just move on to the last question.
All right, so from Eric, how can 2 or more distinct teams best plan, prioritize, coordinate shared work streams? And I won't even say to try to, be safe with this question. That was a bad Agile joke. I apologize.
I can help start, and then maybe everyone else can chime in. For us, we work on a lot of projects with multiple teams. When we have big projects, we tend to have collaboration a lot. So what we do is we invite those people that are going to help us with that piece of work into our daily scrums. Try to get updates from them at the same time that we're delivering something to them, how we can work together, where are you in this piece of work that we have to deliver? How can I help from my side? And also, even before you get into daily scrum, sprint planning, You know, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to deliver in the next 2 weeks? How can we align together so we deliver something to the business that they can test or, you know, move to production? So get those teams involved in your daily scrums, sprint planning, so that you can all deliver together.
Safe. There, I said it down. So this is what the scaled agile framework is all about. It's funny because I recently took a class for SAFE, and it looks like an exam question. So so it's about getting groups of teams working in the same value stream, and I think it's something that's good to look into. But I will say this: I've had clients start using Scrum, not know how to use it very well, and then want to scale it. And I'm like, not really a good idea to scale something that you don't know very well. So I would say, you know, square one is do Scrum, Scrumban, or Kanban well, and then look at scaling. So that's one mistake that I think people jump the gun a little bit, because they're like, oh, you know, like they want to say that they're safe. You know, it's just some of this stuff is a little bit of the marketing and how it looks from the outside. So just be careful with that.
Maggie, Grace?
To me, I think it's all about planning ahead and looking at those dependencies that exist between teams. Within our organization, we have teams that are executing different frameworks, right? So we're trying to emphasize that there's not one way of doing things or being agile, and people need to understand what are the integration points for all those teams, right? So if you're in a Scrumban team, you really need to know who you need from other teams that may do Kanban and adjust to say, well, now I need to make sure that they can deliver at the same time that I need it for the sprint. So it really is looking broader in thinking ahead of what do I need to complete the work that has been defined for the sprint.
Anything you want to add, Maggie?
I was keeping myself muted because there was a fire truck going by. Let's see.
So long as it's not stopping, you're okay.
I don't hear it anymore, so I think I'm good. Let's see. You know, I think that, you know, the methods that we're talking about today, Scrumban and Kanban, the communication across the teams, that process just really enhances the communication because of the frequent check-ins with, you know, daily stand-ups or the operational reviews or retrospectives and the things that are coming up in those meetings. And in addition to that, I know I just glossed over our community of practice, but that really does bring together a lot of the different teams so they can learn from each other and understand how different teams are doing things. And that also really benefits them when they do end up working together.
So why don't you say something about that whole community of practice thing? I think all of us probably have done communities of practice. How are y'all approaching it? And then we can get a final perspective from Susan, and then we'll wrap.
So our community of practice is for our Kanban and Scrumban teams who have been onboarded through our Kanban or Scrumban workshops. And it is a place where we try to build on what we've learned in the workshops. We have teams share their experiences, their struggles, challenges that they're having. We'll solve problems together. And then we really use it as a place to continue on with learning in the Scrumban and Kanban methodologies. So we've been doing this, oh gosh, I think we're on session 17 coming up, and we have it every 2 weeks. I think it's been really beneficial. We've gotten a lot of good feedback, and it's just a place for people to really have a safe place to ask questions.
Yeah, and to what Maggie said as well, it's you know, once you're in your own discipline or doing your own framework, you're so involved in that you don't know what other people are doing. And when you tend to collaborate together, it makes it really difficult to understand the work that each of the teams are doing. So the community of practice brings us together to discuss what we're doing and sharing experiences and stuff like that. But also it helps the teams that are onboarded ask questions from us. So how can you help me to improve my processes? Sometimes it is out of their control. So they need that outside help, and that community of practice provides that opportunity to ask those questions and ask for help.
Susan,
Super.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Grace.
just as a super quick, I just want to mention that, again, today we're talking about Scrumban and Kanban within Northwestern medicine. However, I just want to mention that we do have, or there is a community of practice for Scrum. But what we wanted to separate a little bit is that the teams that we are onboarding, they need additional support, right? In this community of practice is specific to support them. We are a small team from an agile transformation standpoint, so we want to make sure that they support each other and they learn from each other. So I just want to put that out there. That is not just Scrumban and Kanban. We do Scrum, but we dedicate this discussion for those topics.
No, I think that's fair. That's fair. Susan, you want to add some more perspective on communities of practice, and then we'll pull the plug in a minute.
Yeah, last contract where I was doing some Scrum coach support, you know, there was a just sort of an open forum meeting, and I don't think that worked as well. I think it's if you're going to have a meeting, you know, just like anything else, have an agenda, have some goals and objectives. One of the most valuable things I get from community practice is just artifacts like templates, or maybe even just having, you know, everybody you know, join in and show, you know, here's how I do the reporting for my team. I got a lot of value from that. One of my colleagues had a really great report that he shared with his team every week and sometimes daily. And yeah, I got some value from that. Oh, that's great. And then I actually met with him separately and said, okay, how do I actually do that in Jira? Because, you know, there's always the how do you do it with the tool? But that's where I think that you can get a lot of value in community practice, where people just, you know, volunteer to share different things. Just to have an open forum meeting is just, does anybody have any questions? And it's like crickets. So you know, create something.
Yeah, I like the idea of sharing and keeping it in place. Melissa, I want to say thank you for allowing me to facilitate this again. It was a great panel, so I'll hand it back to you so that you can get people to do whatever they need to do.
I just want to thank you all for such a great discussion today. Thank you, Grace, Case, Susan, Maggie, and of course, Tom. I want to also thank our audience for joining and providing some great questions. If we did not get to your question, we will respond by email. We look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming events. Remember to complete the evaluation survey for continuing education certificate, which will be sent out by the end of this week. And please visit our website for more information about our upcoming events. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you again.
Thank you.